Welcome to the Master Passive Income Podcast, where we talk about investing in real estate rental properties with a special focus on making enough money so you can quit your job and live the dream life. And now, here is your host, Dustin Heiner.
It is time for the Master Passive Income Show. My name is Dustin Heiner, and I'm here to help you learn how to quit that JOB, that just over broke job, so you never, ever have to work a job again. Now, there's so much to go through in this show because I have interviewed a fantastic investor. She is a fantastic investor out of Indianapolis, and she shares so many great insights. So I don't want to take too much time in the intro, but I do want you to text the word rental to 33777. Text that word rental to 33777, and I will give you my free real estate investing course so you can get started, so you can learn how to analyze numbers, how to find properties, how to fund the properties, how to manage the properties, and how to quit your job with these rental properties. That's my ultimate goal, is to get you to never have to work that JOB ever again. So text the word rental to 33777. Now, I do want to quickly jump in because it's going to be a long episode, but there's so much gold in here. This investor, she is fantastic. She gives us so much great insights and so much great wisdom in how she runs her business. Very, very similar to how I run my business. It's really fantastic. So let's jump into today's show where I interview Sunitha Roa. She is a fantastic investor out of Indianapolis. She shows us how to do it. Okay, guys, let's get in there. I have somebody who's fantastic at rental properties as well as Airbnb, as well as just being a fantastic person as well. I have Sunitha on with me. Sunitha, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to speak to you today.
I remember when we first met, we were at a conference and you came up to me. We just started talking about real estate and you were sharing everything that you were doing inside Indianapolis and basically the real estate that you're doing, because the conference we were at is not necessarily about real estate. It's about just money and things like that online. And it's fun when we get to meet people in this space or that conference where it's just about all money. We get to meet people that are in real estate. So it's really, really great. So tell me a little bit about how you are investing and where you're investing right now.
So I am investing in Indianapolis, which is where I currently live. I have 7 doors, most of which are long-term rentals. And I recently moved into the short-term rental space with one of those units. I started investing about 2 years ago. So this is when I was still living in Boston. I grew up on the East Coast and I was working and I'm still working as a financial analyst for a biopharma company. And for a while, I was all about doing everything that I could to climb that corporate ladder, working nights and weekends, sacrificing holidays, like you name it, I did it. But after a while, I started to realize, it's not always a meritocracy. And I was living a life where everything that I cared about came after work. And while that has given me dividends by adopting that attitude, I also realized it was very constricting. I was faced with these constraints, the 2 biggest constraints in our lives, which are time and money. Like we make the vast majority of our decisions based on the constraints we have on our time and what we can afford, right? And my company had like this stranglehold on both of those. And that's when I realized, hey, I need to do something different to build a better life. I eventually started looking into different aspects of personal finance and found real estate and just absolutely became enamored with so many aspects of it that I spent 2 years studying. I was in grad school, so I didn't have any money. Spent 2 years studying until I could save up a little bit of money. And then in 2018, I made the jump and have been working on investing and growing my portfolio ever since. And I've been super committed to doing that to the extent where I actually left Boston, left the East Coast where I grew up, a place that I loved, to move out to Indianapolis so that I could design and build my dream life.
Wow, that's awesome. You actually moved so that you could continue and build that business, build that real estate investing. And I love how you're gung-ho. I mean, in 2 years, getting 7 properties, not a lot of people can actually say that. Was that a lot of sacrifice? Was that really, really hard? Tell us a little bit about, not necessarily the entire journey, but tell us about the process of getting 7 doors in 2 years. That seems like a lot of work for most people.
It definitely was a lot of work, but what I love about real estate is that you can front load that work, right? So it's a lot. The first property was a lot of work in the first 2 or 3 months. Since then, it's been very little. And that goes for each ensuing property. So in terms of getting a lot of what, one of the big constraints in real estate investing is finances. So also educating yourself so that you can figure out how to get more properties, because saving strictly based on a W-2 income, that can take a little bit of time. So like learning about seller financing, learning about how to work with other investors, learning about what their needs are, trying to figure out a way to, there's always another way to skin the cat, right? You just have to learn about the different mechanisms in whatever field you choose and use those levers and pull them with the risk tolerance that works for you.
Yeah, now personally love using my own money and using, actually more so, I love using other people's money to buy real estate. And
Yeah.
the reason why I love using my money is because it's so much quicker and easier and faster. And that's when you have money, but not everybody starts with money. I started with $17,000. That was when I first got married back in 2005, 2006. Don't tell my wife I forgot which year we got
I
married.
won't
I
say a
think it was
word.
2005. Yeah. But so I didn't save any money. I was never really taught to save. I was told not to get into debt, which was great, but I wasn't told to save or taught to save. My wife saved, I think she had maybe about $15,000 that she saved up. Then we got married. And within 6 months, I said, you know what? I really want to spend every bit of your money that we just got married and buy a rental property. So we're really blessed now. Praise the Lord. We bought that first one and kept just rolling it over and getting the next one after that. But yeah, utilizing other people's money is really, really good. But then also, like you said, you made a big not necessarily a huge sacrifice in the sense that you moved, but you did something drastic that not many people would do, moving from someplace that you know and love and grew up to someplace like Indianapolis. So tell me about that idea that it's really good for you and your business to actually move there. What made that decision easier for you to do?
The thought of the life that I wanted to live. So my goal is not to climb that corporate ladder for the next 40 years. I want to do well, but then be able to transition out and spend time on things that create the most value in my life, whether that's spending time with my loved ones or traveling. I really am passionate about helping people. I would really love to be in the nonprofit world, and staying where I was would not get me to that end goal very quickly. So it's all about what does your life look like when you haven't been successfully unemployed, and how do you get there more quickly? And just, you have to make those sacrifices sometimes. Like if I was to stay in Boston, that life would have continued, and I would never have gotten to the point, or not for a very long time, gotten to the point where I could truly be successful on my own terms. So it really took time and understanding what that looked like for me in order to build that life. And once I understood what that would take, then it's much easier to make those sacrifices, because you have that vision in mind, and it's much easier to keep working for it when you know what that end goal is and you know how to get there.
And so you started with the idea that I want to build my life or my lifestyle or everything around what I want, as opposed to just working that, and I love to call the term your job, that just over broke job. Yeah, you're just over broke. Your boss is paying you just enough to keep you working, but not too much. It takes money out of their pocket. And so you're just enough and just enough. And I got tired of living that way. And as I bought my first property, I started realizing, oh my goodness, because my business model is I make $250 or more on every single property, or I don't buy it, or I, negotiate, get the price down, all that sort of stuff. I need to make $250 per property on every single one of my property. And when I first bought that first property, I think I made $350 was my first check that I got in passive income.
So good.
Oh my goodness. I was like, how can I get more of these? I mean,
right,
okay,
yeah.
One property is 350. If I had 10 properties, that's 3,500. If I have 20, that's 7,000. Oh, it was just the scales. I was like, oh my goodness, how do I do this? I'm going to jump all in. Okay. So what you did, something that I didn't do. So I started in California when I started investing in 2006. So I started investing not in California. I was living in California, but I bought in Ohio. So far away.
You were a long distance investor too. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. After flying there, viewing everything, talking to people, I didn't do everything wrong, but I didn't do everything right. Like I've so fine-tuned my business model now and how I like a step-by-step system that I have. But from that, I was able to buy my first property far, far away. And then I kept buying them far, far away. I didn't actually move to where my properties are. Now, is that something we would necessarily need to do, is to live where we are investing?
I don't believe so. No. So I was on a race, like to get to that end goal line, right? So you absolutely don't need to. I mean, I think when people ask me about my favorite investment or my best investment, it's probably the very first purchase I made. I made sight unseen, just with a video walkthrough, being completely new from 1,000 miles away. So it's 100% doable. And all 5 doors that I bought that first year when I was still in Boston have all performed so well. Like, I cannot complain. People stay there, people take care of the units. It's just been easy, honestly. So it's absolutely not necessary to move to your location. I have found I have found advantages from being at my location now, but it's definitely not a necessity, especially if you can stay where you are and and you're able to make a higher income and dump that into a lower cost location. I would definitely advocate for staying there. You have to look at the holistic picture, and it's also quality of life, right? Because you were married, you had a family. It's a little bit harder to pick up and move, whereas I'm just like the solo gypsy running around. So it was very easy for me to like pack up my car and be like, later, fam. I'll see you
I
at
love
Easter.
it.
So it's definitely not a necessity, but I would think about what the locals have over you that is advantageous and how you can go about remedying that. So like when I was away, I would make sure to make very, very good relationships with whoever came onto my property, the contractors, etc. And then try my best to network to find them other business once they did a good job, because like your reputation can take you really far. So I worked so hard. And you know what? I actually still do with my property manager. I think I probably recommended her to you as well. I worked so hard to get her business, and even now that I'm here, because you need to be able to figure out how to add value to others. And that is, in the end, somehow it comes back to you. And even if you don't see the direct connection, you're doing good for others. And there's nothing better than that.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I found a while ago that the more people that I help, the better, not just financially I do, which I do better financially, the more people that I help, but just internally, I just feel better when I'm building somebody up. And that's why, like Successfully Unemployed, I love that podcast. I love everything about it. It's like a passion project of mine because not everybody wants necessarily real estate, which is weird to me or us. It's really weird, but there are plenty of ways to do it. And so the more people that I help, the more my business gets better, not just monetarily, but I feel better. I learn so many more things. I change the way I do things because I'm not the end all be all of everything. And so I try to learn from every single person. Okay. So it sounds like to me, I'm a little bit of switch of gear. It sounds like you have a good grasp of, not grasp, that's not the right way to say it. It sounds like you can tolerate risk pretty well, like up and leave and buy 7 properties.
It depends. It depends because my background, my parents are Indian. So like we are very fiscally conservative. Like my mother doesn't know what I'm doing. I think she might have a heart attack if she knew I was buying just house after house. Goodness, so there's definitely some kinds of risk, and learning how to mitigate where you fall back in terms of what you need to take on that risk is also like very important. So it's taking me 2 years to get to the point where I would feel comfortable taking on an investor, investing someone else's money, because I could never sit across the table from someone if I wasn't able to return their capital or wasn't able to give them their returns. Like I know what it's like to struggle monetarily, and there's no way I could put anyone in that position. So I know others who've definitely grown faster because they've been able to like syndicate, draw funds, do whatever they need to do to raise the cash and dump it in somewhere. That's not like a risk I can take. But as long as I learned how to mitigate that, and as long as you know how to do that, it'll be okay in the long run.
So yeah, no, I agree. And there's 2 thoughts. One is I want to talk to you about mitigating that risk, which we'll get into in just a second. But the other thought was that as you're buying that first property, which is one of my more favorite properties, is the one that I bought, very, very first one. That's right. I love that first one. Yeah, it is. It's like the very first one. It's a success. It's like, it's a huge win. Then literally like by the 28th one, I was like, hey, I just bought another property. I don't even remember the address. Like it's going. Yeah. But yeah, as you're building that business and you're trying to mitigate, I love that idea that we're trying to mitigate the risk of investing. Now, let's say I wanted to invest in Indianapolis and I say, you know what? I really don't want to fly there, but I will if I have to. How do we mitigate risk if we're going to say invest in Indianapolis if we live somewhere completely different?
Well, I think first you have to determine what that risk is for yourself. So some people think risk is not getting like as high a cash return. Some people think of risk as like not having appreciation. Like it depends on what kind of life you're trying to build. For me, risk involved not having stable cash flows, even if I was getting higher cash flows. My end goal was to build a life where I could leave my job and easily support my family and not worry about, hey, I have 16 evictions this month. I can't pay my bills. So a lot of people will go and buy maybe like lower class assets because those do have higher projected cash returns. But I knew that was not the life that I wanted to build in 10 years. I'm not thinking about right now. I have a job right now. I'm employed right now. I want to be successfully unemployed. Branding. I'm going to keep plugging that as much as I
I
can.
love it. I love it.
Because it's so true, right? So in order to do that, I bought places that would cash flow, but were also in higher class areas. And I'm not going to lie, that was a hard thing to kind of swallow when I knew that my other friends were getting like $400 a side on like a $50,000 duplex. And I'm like maybe getting like 150 or so for like both my sides on like the first property, but I was like, this is the path that I need to take. This fits the risk exposure and this will allow me to live that life. So, and I'm a very visual person. I think the visual piece helps a lot, but maybe I'm biased. So when you're talking about like mitigating risk, when I think about my specific type of risk, if I want a good asset that's in a stable area, no crime or very, very low crime, right? And so for that, like I learned pretty early on, like Trulia Crime Maps really works. So like really funny story, before I chose to invest in Indianapolis, I visited Kansas City. And this was before I was really new. This was before I knew about crime maps, before I really knew anything, right? And we're walking around this quadplex and it looks like it's in a decent area. Like the sun's out, it's shining, like the place looks nice. The numbers are great. We're talking like 2.5% price to rent ratio. And I'm just like, what am I missing? What am I missing? Right? There's something here that I'm missing. We're walking around the backyard. I found casings for bullets. and then, and then
in the city,
yeah, like in that house. And then I went back and I was talking to someone else and someone mentioned the crime maps. And I was like, what on earth is that? Went back to the hotel room, pulled it up. That place, this is when Trulia was still red, yellow, green. That place lit up like a red Christmas
lots of
tree.
crime.
Yeah, just like on that was like the worst block. So like for me, it's crime. The other thing is school districts. Equally important. So my first 5 properties were all purchased in an area that had the best school districts in the greater Indianapolis area. I'm getting more stable tenants. People don't leave. Places get filled up really early. Last August,
I love renting to families. They're fantastic. Yes,
they are. And so like another anecdotal story is I bought these to rent to families, right? Last year I had a property that went off market, needed to be fixed up, came back on market a week before school started. And I'm just like, everybody is set.
They've already moved, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to get a renter in. I got a renter in at market price in 2 days.
Wow. Yes.
Yeah. So like understanding and so if that's not stability and cash flows, I don't know what is. I might be making a little bit less, but I know what I'm making month over month. No one's giving me a problem about paying. It's never been an issue and never in my 2 years. But those are 2 big things that I look at.
That's great. I love those. And I definitely that Trulia crime map is very, very smart. So what I like to do, and when I mentioned when you said the shell casing, and when I said in the city, is because in the city, anywhere in any city, you cannot fire firearms. Like if you're in the rural areas, if you have
I didn't know that.
Yeah, outside you absolutely if it's county, usually in most states, the county you can shoot firearms, not like, just go gung ho, but it's not absolutely like against city ordinances. But if you're in the city, almost like literally 100% of the cities in America, you cannot shoot firearms or any, like even a high powered pellet gun. That could even be considered bad. Bow and arrow, like you can't shoot anything that's lethal. And so,
Okay,
yeah, when I said, I was like, yeah. So it's inside the city limits, which is very, very bad. So if you're having, and so for me, when I'm looking at an area of the country, and in fact, all the students that I teach, we look at many different cities. But here's the big thing, because somebody would ask me, what do you think about this city? Or what do you think about that city? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not the expert. We need to hire those experts, like the property managers, the realtors. And here's the biggest thing that I always try to make sure every student realizes, that if your property manager will not manage that property because there's high crime, because it's a bad area,
you don't want to be
don't
there.
buy that property. You can't manage it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you're right on with that. I love, and also with schools, the school district is something that's also, because like I said, I love renting to families that parents have solid jobs. They go to a solid school that they really, I'd say they love it, but they're locked in that school. It takes a lot for them to up and move. Their job's right there. Their work, the school's right there. So I love stable tenants. Now, one thing that you mentioned about possibly getting, not you, but like you mentioned the thought of like we're talking about leverage and almost getting over leverage, or utilizing how some people, and you and I are not like that, where we would just grow to like 100, 200 or 300 units because we're just syndicating, borrowing money, and just really getting really highly leveraged. The reason why I did not have any issues because I started investing in 2006 before the crash, all through 2007, 2008, and even now, prices are pretty high. There will be a correction sometime. The reason why I was totally fine throughout, because I invest for cash flow, number one, but number two, I don't go gung ho, like hog wild on getting over leverage. And I was talking to another gentleman, he's an investor. He, in 2008, he literally got destroyed. He was driving a Ferraris, Rolexes, he was high life. And then 2008 hit and everything was gone because he was so highly leveraged. But if we're like us, if we invest for cash flow, we don't just crush our getting too much leverage where all of a sudden it gets destroyed and then everything gets taken away. We're smarter because you and I and people like us, we think long-term. We're thinking, what is this for our future? Not right now, which right now is great getting extra money from one property, two properties, but it's the long haul. Over 10 years, let's say 5 to 10 years, in between there, you should have enough properties to be like, man, this is doing great. I could possibly quit my job. Now, I want to ask you about getting to 7 properties in 1 year. Tell us how you did.
I wish it was 1 year.
2 years. Okay. How did you do that? And getting 7, and these are like probably B-class properties, and those are higher priced properties. How did you get to that many? Did you get investors? Did you save up a lot of money? Did you refinance?
So each one actually had a slightly different tactic, which has been really great for my growth, but it was really stressful trying to figure it out. First one was conventionally financed, put down the 25%. And then second one, those were 2 properties. So 3 doors, 2 properties, one seller selling both of them, and he wanted to get rid of them. And he didn't realize what he had on his hands. Not going to lie.
Meaning good or bad?
Good.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And then he made the negotiation process way more difficult and way more drawn out. But I was like, we have this, and I am not letting this go. So that bundle, I conventionally financed 25%. And then the money he got from the bank for the purchase of that acted as like the down payment for the second, because I was very upfront. I was like, I will execute, I will close, I will do what we need to do. I will follow whatever agreement we agree upon. But I do not have the money for the second one. And I don't even have money for cash for the first one. But I want to keep investing, and I'm hoping we can build a relationship through the years and keep giving each other business and helping each other make money. So if maybe we can work together on this, I think this will help us both in the long run. Right. So it worked. So he seller financed the second property. So I essentially got into that one for no money, and I refinanced him out. Yes, it was amazing. So got into, at that point, that was the 5 doors, got into that, and then refinanced him 6 months later. Then I'd spend all my money. So it's been a little bit slower. But once I moved to Indianapolis, then I started to house hack and got a house with only 7% down, right? So different kind of loan, was great. Got another place for not a ton of money. And then my last store, I used an investor. So I've used a combination of seller financing, conventional house hacking, as well as investor money.
I love real estate, and I love coaching people, because most people think, okay, the way to buy or start investing, the way to buy rental properties, I get a mortgage broker and I get a realtor and I put them together and I have a property. That's just one of hundreds of ways to get funding, find properties, run the properties. Like there's just so many ways to do it. And you just touched on a few of them that are great. And like I said, I love seller financing. It's just so amazing. So good for you. Now, from there, I want to talk to you about, if I wanted to invest in Indianapolis. Now, there are better areas than others. There are bad areas. We don't need to get into that, because if somebody were to invest, they have to do their own homework to really figure out which ones are good or which ones are bad. But what would you say would be the first or second step? Like, we know Indianapolis, we want to start investing there. What's our next step that we got to do?
You have to do your research. And I think it helps a lot to have a visual depiction of what you're looking at. So what I did was I got a map of Indianapolis and I put it in like an Excel document, and like had that on, I had like 2 screens at work. So I had that at one screen and then would do my research on another. And so like, I would look at things like, where are the school districts? Where are the Whole Foods? Where are the Trader Joe's? Where's all of that happening? And put like little pins, right? And see if like a pattern would emerge. And then I do the same thing for the bad areas, put like other different kinds of pins, see if I could figure out a cluster and start looking at it that way. And then once I saw that, like, I'd be like, okay, this is what this tells me. So in Indianapolis, it's called the Circle City. There's a highway that goes all around the center. And so all the good school districts that are non-Indianapolis public schools are all like outside the circle, outside the loop is what they call them, so I could go into it and then corroborate that with like my property manager, because you can go on Bigger Pockets, people will say things, but you always have to verify everything, because everyone is speaking from a different personal bias. So you like never want to take what someone says like at full value. It doesn't mean they don't know what they're doing. It just means that they have their own tolerances that is coloring their vision, and that might not be your path, right? So
that is pausing that thought. So I want you to keep going, but I want to definitely reiterate what you just said. There are many different ways that people invest in real estate, and I would suggest you go with what is the best for your risk tolerance, where you are financially, what your goals are. And what I did was about 2 or 3 years ago, I was like, I want to help more people. So I went on to Bigger Pockets, and I was trying to, get in the forums and help people out. They're asking questions like, well, this is what helped me out. And I'll get one person say, hey, that's a great idea. Thanks for sharing. But then like 2 or 3 other people say, that guy has no clue what he's doing. He is absolutely wrong. Don't listen to him. Listen to me. I'm like, what in the world? Like, this is my business model. This is what worked for me. Like, where are you?
Exactly.
And so there's just so many voices that are going into you. You just need to figure out what's best for you.
Yeah. And what is successfully unemployed for you, right? So
exactly.
For some people, that's buying 300 units in a D-class area and just putting all their money there. And then they're so diversified, it doesn't matter if they have 27 evictions in 1 month. That doesn't work for everybody, Mm-hmm. So you have to figure out what it looks like for you and whether that fits.
I agree. Okay. So from there, and I love the idea, we're figuring out what we're doing. Now, what's the next? Is it next finding the property, or do we got to figure out who's going to actually be running the business? What do we do next?
Yeah, you find your people. Your people will make or break your team, your entire investment career. There have been property managers and other people in Indy who have engaged in fraudulent activities and completely taken thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars from the investors, So it doesn't matter. You can do all your research. You can make all your maps. You can do all your colors. You can like read until like your eyes fall out. But if you're working with someone who is not trustworthy, you can lose all of it. So verify, network, listen, like our gut instincts know a lot more than we give them credit for.
They sure do. I agree.
And I think having people who will tell you no and who will be honest with that, it takes time to figure out if they're being honest. You kind of have to test them a little bit. They are worth their weight in gold. That's why I love my property manager from the beginning. She might not always say no, but she'll be like, okay, I think this needs a higher return. What does that mean, Sunitha? That means there's probably higher risk. So you need more money to be compensated for that. Therefore, it's probably not a better area. Therefore, it might not fit my model. Okay, moving on. and then also being very clear with them sometimes. So like with my agent, I kind of had to train him, so I have this map, right? And so in the circle, in these areas are safer. My projected cash flow is going to be lower. So here's what my price to rent ratio will be, just as like a quick test. If I'm going down into the center, this is what it needs to be. And these are the specs it needs to be at in order for it to in order for me to make it work. So it's learning that, getting the evidence from the people around you, getting honest people, and then training them to further tease out exactly what you are looking for and exactly what you need to set up that life. Because again, it's not about the success of the investment right now, this year, next year. Hopefully it is successful, but it's about building the portfolio that will allow you to live the life that you need to live.
I love that idea. And as I'm working with my students, what I'm telling them is as many points of information or reference or knowledge that you can get and put in your brain, you need to disseminate that inside your brain. So if you have a contractor there, if you have your property manager, if you have an inspector, even if you have somebody that's just unclogging a leak or something like, or fixing a leak or unclogging, you want to get as much information as possible. And especially a property manager, not just the information, but trustworthy information. If you have a not so good property manager that doesn't call you back, that isn't on top of things, that isn't keeping in contact with you, making probably some charges that you're like, man, why did I get charged for this? Or, hey, this wasn't necessary, I would not have approved it. You need to have people that you trust. And so
and I think also people who are really on top of things. So one thing that I learned is if your property manager is like newer, they need to understand how the money moves. Otherwise, you're not going to get your money. I had to learn that the hard way by having one of my properties shift to someone I hadn't chosen. And it was really hard for me to get my money because he did not understand the full dynamic. So you need someone who knows it like the back of their hand. I don't believe in taking a chance in someone new, even if it's at a cheaper rate, because you will pay for that. One way or another.
You are 100% right. I don't want to pay for a new person's mistakes. I don't like going with somebody that's brand new that they can get their teeth cut on other properties. That's totally fine. But just for my properties, my family, I feed my kids with this money. And so I want to make sure I have somebody as spot on or knows their numbers or knows how to run the business. Now, on top of that though, I do give them, all of my property managers, I give them so they have their guidelines of what they normally do. Like, rent's due on the 1st, it's late after the 3rd when they do the evictions, and they have a whole bunch of other things that are their business process. But what I do is I look at what they already have designed for all of their clients, and I say, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad, but this is how I want you to run my property. So blanket, this is what you do, default to this. And so in doing that, they have an understanding of how I want my business to run. And I'm not going to have to question like, hey, are they actually doing it right? So that's a great, right? Now, once let's say we built a team, or we have, number one, the property manager, we have some contractors, we have some handymen, and we're getting ready, and we have a couple realtors looking around. What is funding the next step? Is it finding the property next? What's the next step after we've already started developing the team?
You've got to have the money ready, right? Because if you find the property and don't have the funding, what use is the property? So have the money ready, depending on whatever that is. Sometimes that can be a little bit more challenging. That's something that I struggled with when I started looking at investors. There was someone I wanted to work with last year who pulled out last minute for that refi with that seller finance property. So I won't be working with him again, even though he has plenty of money. It's just, that's not a risk that I can take, so just making sure that whoever you work with or your own funding is solid and ready to go, because not only does that affect your ability to execute, it also impacts how people perceive you. You want to be a closer every time you get to the table. You want your agent to know, you want your property manager to know, if they bring you something, you say, yeah, I can do it, that you actually will do it. And you will do, and sometimes deals fall through. I had a quadplex fall through, but that did not mean that I did not. Yeah. Anyway, let me phrase that easier. I called every bank in that town trying to find someone who would finance it. And I could not make it work. I was running headfirst into a brick wall, and they need to know that if you say you're going to do it, you're going to do everything in your power to make it happen, So there's no way that you can go get a property or get one under contract or try to get one under contract or have someone looking and not have the money. Can you imagine that conversation? Sorry, I don't have any money right now, after you've been looking for weeks.
And people like us we're go-getters. We're gonna do everything we can to get this deal to go through. But sometimes it just will. But I love your thought that we want to be seen as buyers, as investors, as we get the deal done. If we have a deal come to us, especially I don't know how we haven't actually talked about this, but I personally love wholesalers. They're some of my favorite people to work with because they work so hard. And I wake up in the morning, I'm drinking my coffee, and I open up my email of all a list of properties that they worked hard to get. They're sending it to me. Here's the property. I'm like, well, shoot, I'm getting this like 10% or 15% below market value. I'm paying you like $2,000 or $3,000. Shoot, that's a good deal. Let's go ahead and jump on or something like that.
Yeah.
I love wholesalers and I love working with people. So if we're going to be finding properties, do you have any tips or any ideas other than like, MLS or Zillow, any other tips that we can do to find good properties?
I think it depends on your market. So in Indianapolis, we have like a Facebook group for out-of-state investors that I'm still a part of, even though now I'm in state. And we do have like people who, like local vendors and stuff. And that's actually how I found my last deal, was through this like Facebook group, and it's just trying to figure out who the people are who bring in the most volume. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to measure that with like how big their buyers list is, because I mean, some of the biggest guys, I can't really compete with on their buyers list, because they will have people come in from California who have like hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash, and they can afford to put like that $3,000 down, non-refundable deposit, buy it sight unseen. I'm still working around the clock for my finance job, supporting myself with my W-2 income. Like, I can't throw $3,000 at this property, $3,000 at that property, not execute, or buy one and then find like knob and tube wiring or some weird electrical stuff going on. Like, I can't afford those kinds of mistakes with the size of my portfolio right now. So maybe at some point I can, but if I work with the smaller guys, I can build that relationship with them and work with them so that maybe I get a little more time to get financing. Maybe I can actually get that inspection, because they know that I'll execute time and again, and they don't have quite that list to pull from. So.
Yeah. And what you said was something that is really interesting, because if somebody is a doctor or a lawyer, they usually have lots of taxable income. They want to park that somewhere. They're not investors like us, where we're passive income. We're investing for cash flow because that's what we feed our family on. They're like, shoot, I'm going to actually, even though I'm going to lose like $100 a month on this property in passive income, I'm going to be saving thousands of dollars a year in taxes. So shoot, I'll just park my money here. So it's hard. Like I completely understand. It's hard to compete.
I'll raise you one. So like 2 years ago when I was in Boston, that's when like the Chinese investors were just buying everything in sight. That was why I knew I could invest in Boston. Everything was going for like tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars over asking, depending on the property size. It was huge. And a lot of these properties were older. They definitely had massive maintenance issues, but they were buying them sight unseen. And why? Because they had the currency risk, like that they were hedging against. It didn't matter if it lost actual cash. There were other reasons that they were investing, So the same thing goes in any other market. You have to understand why other people are investing and how you can compete with that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Now, I want to also touch on the numbers game. Like, the more offers you put in, eventually you're going to get one. Tell me about what are your thoughts about, should we put in just one offer a month? When we say, hey, it's a great deal, let's put an offer in now. Should we put more offers in? How do we make sure that the numbers kind of work in our favor to eventually we get a good deal?
I think it's harder to find good deals. So if you find one, put an offer in ASAP. And if you're in a predicament where you need to get the financing for an extra one, try to figure that out. Do everything you can to figure that out. Friends, family, fools, whoever, like try to find some help or maybe take on a partner. But I think in this market, it's so competitive that it's hard to find good deals. You shouldn't stop yourself because it's like, oh, what if this one goes through? Well, you'll find out in 2 days, or a day. You just have to keep throwing those darts until it sticks, and throwing good darts at a good board, not just any.
Yeah. Yeah, because you will not get 100% of the deals you do not put offers in. Like, you literally won't get it because you didn't put an offer in. So you just have to put an offer in. And on top of that, here's what I always try to tell all my students is, you absolutely do not or should not, or I will say, you're disowned as a student if you buy bad deals. We don't buy bad deals just because, we got one. No, we wait until we have a good deal. And one thing that, because you mentioned your second property was like an investor, and he had two different properties together, and we're bundling them together. Usually when students come to me, they'll say, hey, there's one investor who has like 6 properties. They're all bundled together. And I always tell them, analyze every single property. We don't buy 5 good properties for a lemon, a bad property,
That'll
even
sink
if we're
you.
getting good deal. Exactly. We only buy good properties.
And I think one thing I might add to that is like, what is your definition of good, right? Because I've talked to a lot of investors, especially recently, who can't tell me why it's a good deal or a bad deal. Like I described it to someone earlier this morning as peeling off the layers of an onion, you know? So like it might work in the numbers, but what are the economics? Like there are people going to like turnkeys and they're interested in Indianapolis, but then they end up buying one an hour outside of Indianapolis because that's the only place a turnkey company can make it work, you know? So okay, the numbers look okay, but then what are the other aspects of this? And why are they selling it at this price? And why are they selling it here versus there? Like you have to keep pulling that back in order to determine what is actually a good deal. There's so many aspects, and you have to do that work. Otherwise, it is not worth it. You will probably lose your money.
Wholeheartedly agree. You're absolutely spot on. Now, how do we know? Because we have to know that criteria. Do we have to look at every single property and continue to be analyzing properties in the area so that when one comes on the market, hey, I know what a good deal looks like. I could jump on this one. Or should we just like pull up every other month and say, let me look for a property there now? Like, what are your thoughts about constantly looking versus randomly looking?
I think you're leading me with your questions a little bit. Are you trying to make a point? No, I'm teasing. So, I mean, I looked at hundreds before buying my first one, and not because I couldn't pull the trigger, but because I didn't know exactly what was a good deal at first, because it's also comparative to what else is going on, right? So like if I can find something in a good area now that's 1% and change, that's a good deal, depending when you can't find anything else, you know? So you need to be able to compare to the other things in addition to comparing to your own needs. And the only way you can do that is by having your pulse on the temp of the market, which means consistently analyzing, especially in these days. If you look, like every 6 weeks, our lives have been turned upside down in the last 6 weeks. What you knew in January no longer holds. So it is like just everything's been wiped clean. So you need to like be on top of it. That's the only way you can stay sharp. So I bought those 5, and then I closed on the last door like September, October. I didn't buy the next one until the next July when I moved here. And I was so rusty. I'd already closed on 5 doors, and I'd done it in a much harder way, doing it, never setting foot on them. Like I'd already been in this house the year before because I knew the owner. It was a long story. And like I knew this house, but I was like struggling with like my analysis because it had time had passed, you know? So like you definitely need to stay sharp in order to like be able to like really execute. It becomes easier. Executing sometimes is hard, especially for new investors, because there's a lot of triggers you have to pull. But if you keep stepping up and keep putting yourself out there, then it gets easier to pull those triggers time after time, because you're like, I've been here, I've done this, I've almost pulled the trigger. This is just a small inch forward.
Yeah, I love that idea. I want to switch a little bit of gears to, we've been talking a lot about long-term rentals.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I am not an Airbnb expert at all. And
Who is?
especially right now,
Yeah.
if you think about what's going on right now where people don't travel, they're locked in their houses. And I see there are some people that do the rental arbitrage where basically they're leasing somebody else's house, putting furniture in it, and then having an Airbnb, and they're turning over Airbnb people, but they're literally having it closed down. They're stuck for the leases. They have all the furniture, but nobody's traveling. They have all these expenses. Now, that's a whole different model, which we're not talking about. You own these houses, so we're still investors. It's just short-term versus long-term. So we're not talking about rental arbitrage, but tell me a little bit about, because I mean, just teach me, what are your thoughts about short-term versus long-term rental properties?
So I converted my smallest unit in that first property that I bought into a short-term rental last October. And I think first things first with short-term rentals, I thought this back then, and now this just like supports my theory. Have more than one exit strategy. If it's just a short-term rental, don't do it. Like if you can only make it work as a short-term rental, I should say, don't do it. And I'm not a fan of the arbitrage. I'm a fan of building wealth, you know, by paying down that mortgage.
We're long-term people. Yes, absolutely.
Exactly. And so like have both of those Make sure you're building for the long term. You have an exit strategy. And then also, the way I looked at it is like, what kind of bar did I have in order for this to be successful? So like it was a small unit, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, split level carriage house, maybe like 400 square feet. If we look at the mechanics of that tenant, it's hard to make that profitable. It wasn't downtown. I'll be getting a more transient tenant. So like the families that we love to move in, that's because they don't leave because it is so hard to pack up all your kids and all of their stuff and go to another place, to another rental, right? Whereas if you have like one person who's like a professional with a couch and like a TV, and they get bored and they're like, oh, I want to go somewhere more exciting, do something new.
I want to move from Boston to Indianapolis. Let me just go ahead and do that.
Okay. Point taken. Do not rent to myself. Got it. And then when that happens, if you have a property manager, then you have to pay a new leasing fee every year. You have vacancy and turnover costs. What are the biggest cost killers in our business? Vacancy and turnover. This is set up to barely, maybe make a little money, not a ton. This is not going to make me rich, right? This one unit, small unit that I have. And then also every decision that I made in these last 2 years in terms of what I bought was through the lens of, we are going to have a correction. How do I mitigate against that risk, right? So that's why I bought in higher class areas, because I knew if I went to the C areas, those guys would have more trouble once the manufacturing plant shut down like they are now, once things start happening and they don't have those savings. And it was just going to be rough. But with this rental, if there's a recession coming, it's 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom. You look at the 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom, whatever Airbnbs that go for like $500 a month. That is great during boom times. Boom times were not going to last by the time I started. And they were definitely not going to last when I started last year. I had other friends who were like, hey, turn the other side to, I had like 2 bedroom, 1 bathroom on that same property. And they're like, turn that to an Airbnb too. And I was like, no. Not happening, So the bar for me was very low. And then just looking at, like, I only had to make 450, essentially $500 a month in order to be more successful than a long-term rental. And if I'm renting every night and I look at the other Airbnbs in the area, and like the cheapest is like $40-50 if I want to compete on price and go out $50 a night. And I look at average occupancy in that area, average occupancy 60%. You can do the math. What's $40 or even $35 a night at 50% occupancy? It's probably still more profitable than a long-term rental. Like, so if I completely suck at this, I probably still make some money, but I don't suck. So mostly.
But I do absolutely want to make sure everybody understands that you have a great point, is having not necessarily, you were use the word extra strategy. It could also just be how you make money from that property. Yes. I mean, you can have many different ways. And one of them could be a short-term rental property. Like one of my properties in Arizona, I'd love to turn it into a short-term rental property whenever the tenants move out and everything. I'd be totally fine to do that just to try it out. But when you think about Airbnb or VRBO or these short-term websites that, put, a renter and a one-day renter versus long-term, when they put that in there, that's really in the boom cycles. Like when people aren't moving, like right now, people are literally locked down. If they're not going anywhere, they're not going to rent. And so I love how you have an idea, like you can have options. And that's something I just love, is real estate gives you so many options if you do the business right. So let's jump into, I want to ask you, what is one of your bit of advice that you can give to anybody who is saying, you know what, I'm going to get started. I know I'm already going to get started. I know my goal. I know the vision of what I want to do. I like what Sunitha has been talking about, building wealth and having long-term wealth and eventually being successful and employed. What is any bit of advice that we should look at to get started? You've already given us great stuff, but is there anything else that we could be looking at?
I mean, I think there are a few things. One, it's obviously educating yourself, making sure you know what you're doing. Two, especially in this environment that we're living in, be ready for the worst case scenario. Can you handle that? What does that look like? And then 3 is build your network. And that's not just like your core 4, your property manager, your agent. That is made up of other investors who are legitimately, they're not just like your acquaintances. They are your legitimate friends. Like they are the people you can call on when everything's hitting the fan and you can't figure it out, because calling another investor who is not actually your friend when you're like panicked because of X, Y, and Z. That's not going to go so well. But like, you really have to work to build your network and surround yourself with like-minded people. That is going to make all the difference in the world.
That's great. I love that idea. And I know that my business, as I started telling more people that I was an investor, and especially starting Master Passive Income, now like lots and lots of people know that I'm an investor. Like I'm shouting it to everybody, I'm an investor. So many more deals come, so much more money comes to me. Like, hey, can I invest through you? And things like I have to turn down opportunities just because there's so many. And so the more people that I work with, more people I talk to, more people I network with, the better things get. So I love that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So from there, what is one little bit of advice that you would give your younger self? Like, younger Sunitha back in, I don't know, like let's say 20 years old or 18 years old, any bit of advice that you would, it could be business, could be life or anything like that.
Start investing earlier. Okay. So you want to hear a story, right? So I grew up in Florida. I moved to Boston for undergrad, I think like 2010. Think about where the Florida market was around then, and I've always been obsessed with houses. I wanted to buy a house before I got accepted to college up there. And I actually wanted to I was living in this really cute townhouse. It was like 800 square feet, 2 bedroom, 1 bathroom. I was paying $850 a month, the going rate. Townhouses in that area were selling for $40,000. And they were nice. They were and they had been built like 4 years before. We're selling at $100K and the market just like tanked, right? And so I actually tried to go get financing to buy one, and I had like $20,000 saved up at that point, and the bank would have financed it. And I didn't take the time to understand the mechanics. I couldn't understand like numbers or anything. Like I had no idea what was going on. And I really wish I'd taken the time to get like a little bit more like grit in my spine and been like, there's an opportunity here. But I did not even see it as an opportunity. I didn't even know what was happening. Even if I just bought that one condo, like life would be different.
Absolutely. And look at how much those are probably going for at least 100, 150 now, if not more,
Oh, totally.
which would be great. And I'm getting questions all the time right now from basically anybody who reached out to me, asking the question, is now the right time to invest or should I wait? And what I always tell them is, well, basically, yes to both. Is now the right time? Yes. Is it right time to wait? Yes. And the reason why I say it's both is if you're buying the right deal that's making you passive income, you're not over leveraging it, you're not going to kill yourself. Because like I said, I started investing in 2006, like when it was still taking off. I started investing then, I was still making money all through the crash. So if you're doing the business right, you absolutely can. And if you're going to invest in something like a $500,000 house, that's probably not the best idea. Because imagine if there was a crash, not saying there will, but if there was a crash where it cuts in half. So a $500,000 house is now $250,000, but a $100,000 house is now $50,000. So instead of losing $250,000, you're losing 50, or you know what I mean? So there's different ways to invest and there's different ideas. But a big thing that you said was you educated yourself, or you wish you would got more education, and now you have education. Whereas back then it was really a lot more difficult. And another reason why I tell people right now is the best time to start investing is you need to start educating yourself now, because if and when there is a crash, because you're thinking there is one, you don't want to educate yourself in the bottom of the crash when you're starting to learn and you're going to miss the entire run up. You want to educate yourself now so that when it does correct, when it does come down, you're like, those are great deals. It's half off. Let me buy them right now. I've already have the network. I already have the money fund. I already have the business set up. I already have everything ready. Now I could jump into it. What do you think?
That's exactly. I was waiting for a pause so that I could say exactly that. So like people have been telling me since I started, hey, wait, there's going to be a crash. Okay, great. If I waited, I would probably have X amount of dollars to spend, but I'd be doing everything as a brand new investor, and I wouldn't have the reputation or the networks that I've worked to build today. So like now I have the lenders, now I have the investors, I have friends who have the rehab team. I know the wholesalers. I've worked with all of them. They know I'll execute. So when I'm in a position where I can find deals, I might not have the cash, but I can find people who have the cash now. Absolutely. Because I have the experience. And now I know how to make it successful, because like the first one or two you do, you're kind of like operating on theory, and you're like, oh my God, I think this is okay. You don't want to be saying, oh, I think this is okay, and what could arguably be the best investment period in like our lifetime. Like we don't know what's going to turn out, but I don't think things are going to be good with the way the markets are looking in terms of like lending, et cetera. You don't know, but you want to be prepared. You don't want to sit back in, what year are we? 2020. You don't want to sit back in 2026 I always have these
You're
moments.
not nearly as old as I am. I can't believe you're thinking, what year is
Oh,
that?
I do stuff like that all the time. The simple things I forget. But you don't want to be looking back at 2026 going, my life is not that different. And now we're out of the recession or the correction, whatever we had, and I won't
I
have
missed it.
another opportunity for another 7 to 10 years. You don't want that to be you. So
No.
if
And
you find the numbers, make it work.
your apps, I love everything that you're saying. I completely wholeheartedly agree. I am so excited for when the prices get dropped in half, or I don't want to say recession because it's going to hurt lots and lots
So
of
many
people,
people. Yeah.
but people that are hugely over leveraged, the people that don't do the business like I'm doing, and they might lose their shirt, and I'll be there and say, yeah, I'll take that property half off. Yeah, please. So I have plenty of cash waiting. Plus I have the knowledge. Plus I have the experience and the network, just like everything you said, that I'm excited for when there is something that is going to change. And everybody who has, like you, like me, who already have experience, we've already learned the way we like to do the business, our business model, we can jump on those things. So, man, that's great. Okay, so Sunitha, last thing is, what is one nonfiction book that you would say is a really, really good book that we should look at and read?
So one book that I really like is on emotional intelligence, written by the Harvard Business Review. So I think that is really key just for life, and especially in real estate, because this is all about understanding people. This is not about houses. It's about humans, and it's about working well with people, building those relationships. And it's not just like networking stiffly in a suit. It's about actually building true bonds with other people so that everyone can help each other be successful. And you can only do that if you are like empathetic, if you're able to self-regulate, if you're able to like master these, or I mean, who can actually master? But if you're able to be strong in these different areas of like emotional intelligence and dealing with people, that's like, they say EQ goes far, emotional quotient goes far higher, takes you far higher than IQ. And I'm a firm believer in that, especially you don't need to be a genius to run the numbers. You need to be smart enough, but the people who know people and can make like the deals happen with the other people, I think those are the ones who will truly get ahead. So that is number one. And the other one, well, I have like a bunch, but another one that I really like is Tribe of Mentors by Tim Ferriss, because like I really like exposure to successful people is how we can learn how they think. It's not necessarily what they do, but it's the thought process that gets them there. That's what makes them successful. So being able to like have some sort of access to a ton of people in a ton of different industries who have set themselves apart, and to see what kinds of things that they prioritize in their lives and in their business and whatever, like I think that's invaluable. So those are like probably two of my favorites.
Love it. I love those. Those are great. And I completely agree. The more people that, well, one, like I said earlier, the more people that I help, the better my life is financially, emotionally, all that sort of stuff. But the more that I'm actually caring for the other person, not just like, how can I make money? How can I, serve you to
No,
make money?
yeah,
No,
no.
literally caring for people and having that emotional quotient. I think you're absolutely right. I love that. Okay, Matt, Sunitha, you give us so much great insights. I know I've learned plenty. I know everybody else has learned a lot listening to this. I know people are going to want to reach out to you. How can they find you? How can they reach out to you and talk to you about everything that you're doing?
So I have a website and an Instagram handle, of course. So my Instagram handle is Griffix Property Group. It's GRIFFIX Property Group. And then my website goes by the same name. So griffixpropertygroup.com. And then they can DM me, or there are places to shoot me a message on my website. So love
That's
to help.
awesome. Yeah, Sunitha, thank you so much for being on the Master Passive Income Show. You give us great, great insights. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed this.
See, I told you you were going to get so much great insights out of everything that Sunitha has done, all of her business, and even just wisdom in general, like how she views life, how she likes to help people and serve people. And that's what gravitated me towards her when we met, was she was very, very helpful, just like how I try to be. I try to be as helpful as possible to as many people as possible. And her and I just hit it off really, really well. She's fantastic. She's out of Indianapolis. Reach out to her. But you guys are so great. I want to give you my free real estate investing course. Text the word rental to 33777. rental to 33777 so I can get you my free real estate investing course. Now, you guys are fantastic. I want you to not let anything stop you from investing in real estate. This is something you need to do. Remember, the best time to start investing was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. Get started today. Get your education. And remember, I have my Real Estate Wealth Builders membership where I am doing group coaching. I have all my courses, all my 5 courses in there. I want you to be a part of that as well. So go to Master Passive Income at the top. There's a link in there. You'll find it. There's a link in there. Go to the real estate coaching section and you'll learn all about that. But you guys are fantastic. Thank you again for being here on the Master Passive Income Show. We'll see you next week.